we do these events every so often or so. So our today's event is Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service. And my name is Vishal, and with me is my co-host Prashant, also on the call. Today, with a quick introduction for a company called Tangenz, where we work with, and Tangenz is a technology and a management consulting firm specializing in 4 practice areas. Today, we'll start with EPM, or also called as Enterprise Performance Management, which caters to the CFO and the FP&A organization. The second one is ERP. We typically offer all the way from implementation to managed services for all-in-one ERP services. And the third one is analytics. Quite frankly, none of the ERP applications you'll get the full benefit unless you have a strong BI strategy. Also serve a number of customers across various industries. And in the last few years, we've been recognized by CIO and the Inc. magazine to be in the most promising parts. Quick intro about Tangenz. The next slide goes to why we're having this webinar. So if we look at some of the trends that are shaping the entire economy, and you look at the companies that were in the S&P 500 about years ago, half of them gone and then replaced by newer companies that have brought in different business practices. And what a lot of the companies are realizing is if they don't move fast enough, or they don't even try some new business strategies and fail fast enough, just taking action is a problem. As a result, business leaders at all different companies are asking their finance teams around some of the implications, around the financial implications of applying some changes to business strategy. So this was a survey that was done by CFO magazine, and overwhelmingly, the finance teams, there is a realization that there is a need for a better planning tool, a better tool. And the survey also uncovered that the most organizations are using Excel, Microsoft Excel, as that tool for now. Yeah. So more surveys and stats. CFO magazine came back and said 75% of the finance managers are still swimming in spreadsheets. And I don't need to preach to the choir. Everybody knows some of the hardships of using an Excel type of solution. Yeah. Also, a lot of business collaboration that gets into getting into the end product of a spreadsheet. Typically, workers will have to collaborate with 10 other folks to refine results, to get raw data, to create reports, and then ultimately use that with the board team members to review the results. And the cost, I'll be shocked if anybody says that it's not in their top 5 priorities. So managing and reducing cost is also the typical paramount importance. I love this slide. This sort of a self-assessment for companies to understand, where do they end up in this spectrum. Inside is what we call a classic finance, where the team spends 75% of the time just collecting and coding data in Excel spreadsheets. A minuscule amount of time is spent analyzing and working with the decision makers, the results of that, the data. As the modern finance is diagonally opposite, the data collections and reports is done seamlessly behind the scene, and as a result, the finance team is able to spend a lot of more time with the board members, with the business leaders, and with the business strategy. And that's where the goal is for organization is to be on the right-hand side of the spectrum.
I agree.
To this is, and this is something that we're seeing over the last few years, a massive adoption of planning and budgeting cloud service, aka PBCS. And this is a tool that runs the cloud. So with IT intervention or with no capex investment, you can turn this on in a relatively short amount of time, and it allows you to benefit from what we call these 4 pillars. First one, around gathering data, that is a moot point after you implement the solution. Analysis becomes and comes to the forefront once you have the data collected. The inclusiveness, which is a lot of organizations, they do top-down or bottom-up budgeting and planning. This tool allows you to do that along with business drivers. And the visibility, once you have the data in there, it's all the reports, all the data that you need to make decisions are there is present in real time. And this tool allows you to do a lot of what if business that, the business leaders are asking, what if we do this? So this tool is then served to do a lot of the scenario planning. And then finally, business would change. What you plan for today may not be the same as 18 months down the line. And what this tool allows you to do is make a lot of those adjustments, which are configurations that you can make without intervention from the IT or from a developer. So at a level, the problem statement and solution that we are seeing that are massively being adopted by the CFO office. Slide, and then what we'll do is we'll show you the product in action. Some of the benefits is we've worked with companies where it takes anywhere from 10 to 14 weeks to complete budgeting cycle. And adoption of PBCS, they've been able to narrow it down to within 3 to 4 weeks. Deployment is relatively fast, as this is a cloud solution. You can have it up and running within a matter of weeks. No capex investment, no need to set up servers, hardware, and other things. But this is a completely subscription-only pay for number of users that are leveraging the application. Ability to connect from anywhere in the world, so helps greatly when you have a workforce that are dispersed in different geographies. And again, finance people love to use Excel. So this application natively connects into any of the Excel, PowerPoint, Word applications and allow you to do a lot of the analysis in Microsoft Office. And other pieces around backups, recovery, they're all taken care of just being on the cloud. No need to upgrade, no need to upgrade to servers 5 years, or no need to upgrade any software. So, this application is within the confines of a business community with no intervention from the IT. So those are level benefits. We'll certainly open it up for Q&A down the line and dive into some of those questions. Feel free to send me a chat, and we can answer questions if you have anything on the go.
Okay.
What we'll do now is to transition to our demo side of the house. And Prashant, I'll the baton over to you. You can see your screen.
Yeah, Vishal. So this is the landing or home page for PBCS, the Plan Budgeting Cloud Service. This is the cloud version of the EM tool Hyperion Plan Budgeting, and much more robust than the Hyperion Planning version. Now, the way that we now see with Excel-based planning is kind of collaboration, trying to consolidate the numbers and then have control over the process. Because when you have Excel, a lot of planners can have a free hand in trying to get numbers without the driver's calculations. Where in case we want to have more controlled, straight approach for planning, PBCS would be a good tool because the corporate can have defined drivers which can control the planning and budgeting process. Then there would also be regarding security, because the data is centralized, and based on the security, users are given access to those roles and departments for which they have access to. By doing that, this can be built in such a way that leverage on very few amount of artifacts, whereas it can be used by multiple users, and then based on the security, they can only see and perform activities that are required for that purpose. Now, here is the home page for PBS, and what we see on the screen is kind of known as cards, and this is how it is kind of structured. We will go into the details of each of them, but first we'll how the system is kind of configured or how it is set up. We have navigation pane, which shows all the artifacts that are there behind the scenes. And again, because I'm an administrator, I'm able to see all the menus that are open, but based on the security and roles that we provide for, only the relevant parts will be visible to the users. The PB structured is, we have something known as dimensions. So this forms a core component of PBCS solution. So this is a multi-dimensional cube that we call, and it's dimensions. When I go this tab, you can see the list of dimensions that we are using, and multiple modules within the application. So typically what happens is we have different functions that are required. For example, we may need to do workforce planning, we may need to do CAPS planning, and each may have a different demanding requirements, because some of them will be by employees, some of them could be each product, where the final statements may not need a lot of details. So there are different spaces created within a single application, so that it becomes much more easier for users to use the application. Now, I have is kind of list dimensions. This dimension does is it kind of between different components. For example, we have account dimension, currency, department, entity. Go into each of these details to identify to know this thing works, and each of component kind of comes together to form a solution. Now, when I account, so account hierarchies normally have all the chart of account, which typically comes with financial planning. We have income statement. We have when it goes down to the GL level, and have hierarchies define the system. So these hierarchies kind of play the role of setting up how these things will get aggregated and then rolled out. Once we have this set up in the application, the reporting part becomes much more easier. You just need to pull in the data into the report, or even Smart View, which is the Excel-based reports, to be able to view the data. So apart from financial G accounts that roll up to income statement or balance sheet, we also have what are statistical account or drivers that kind of drive the budgeting process.
Just Prashant, quick housekeeping for the folks on the webinar. Please feel free to drop a question via chat. So answer questions as we go along. Keep going, Prashant.
Yeah. So we'll just quickly go through these components, and then we will see how this thing all comes together when we do an actual planning process. Next, we have departments. So when we has departments under the hierarchy, So this will enable us to create a plan for each of the departments. We have taken some departments here, so it can go down to much more detailed level as well. For multiple entities, so the entity mentioned to create hierarchies under that. So we have multiple legal entities. Can use it. We can also have additional sub hierarchies under each of them. And the entity can be tagged to a different currency, and based on the currency that it has been tagged, we can do a currency conversion from maybe US dollars or any other currency that we want. So the trading can actually be in multiple currencies, and the reporting can be in maybe a few currencies like USD or Euro that we want to do. And when we talk about entity and departments that we saw, so this dimensionality kind of creates a matrix so that we use one entity with multiple departments, or we can structure hierarchy based on specific reporting requirements that we have. So we have come up here with kind of a generalized dimensionality, where implementation depends on what requirements specific client would have. So we structure these dimensions, and that because these dimensions would kind of drive the planning and as well as the reporting process. The period dimension, which is roll up of the month into quarter into year. When we do at the base level of each of the periods or months, so it typically rolls up to the quarter as well as the year. Associated with periods years, so we have financial years that have been defined, and combination of financial year and period, we can input data as well as calculate data. So that will give us the year and month combinations. Then some things like product. For example, we do our revenue and cost of sale planning by each product. So you have a product dimension that can be used to plan by each product. But then we will see later on that not everything may be by product. For example, the departmental expenses, operating expenses may not necessarily by each product. So that's where we use something known as a no product to capture that information. So association will have a combination of products, a combination of departments, but when we do a reporting, when we do at the total level, we can see that all the data is consolidated at the top level. Also something that is a scenario dimension. Now scenario dimension is used basically for having different types of data. Now, for actual here, so data that comes in from the ERP systems is uploaded into the scenario known as actual, so that it can for variance reporting or in the planning process as well. Then we have scenarios for planning, and we have multiple scenarios based on what need have. We have a plan scenario wherein we can do a planning process. Upon this plan, we may also need to do a regular forecast, like a quarterly forecast or a monthly forecast, in order to raise our plans. So for that, we have a different scenario member. So the whole purpose of having these different members is to have data into different buckets, or store the data so it can be used as and when it is required. Then we have versions. So this is where if we want to have multiple versions of our plans, we use this particular thing. So normally we may have to have a best scenario, most likely scenario, or if you want to have a draft version or a final version. So we can have multiple versions of our plans and forecasts. And coming to the currency dimensions. So this is kind of need to do a multi-currency planning. Currency dimension under which we have different currencies. So when the company is planning, they may do it in their local currencies, and then we convert it into a reporting currency. Since
I'm getting a few questions via text. Let me address those as you want. First question that was submitted was, how quickly can PBS be implemented? The answer to this is we're talking weeks. Unlike, solutions that take quarters or a few additional months, we're talking weeks. We've had customers that have gone through the requirements, tailored the solution based on their needs and got them up and running in a matter of 6 weeks. So quickly. The second question that I got was, how does PBS compare with other tools in the market? So there are two things that are going on. When I look at the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, PBCS is the leader in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner. And in addition, as of now, about 4,000 customers have successfully adopted PBCS, and these are different industries across 80-plus countries or so. Massive adoption is what we're seeing across PBCS. Keep going.
Okay. So because dimensions form the core components of this solution. Gone through the dimensions. So other things that are available for us is forms. So we create forms which can be for the purpose of inputting data or actually even view data. Now, good thing about the forms is we don't need to create for example, each department or each entity. So we generate forms which are used by across all the departments or entities, and depending on what access they have, they are able to see the data. When we go into the front part, when we the home page, we have these cards, and these cards can be organized by different activities. So what I'm here is we have the admin activities for planning. Under admin activities, we can have different kind of sub under that. Here, for example, we have revenue admin. We are trying to just wherein as a corporate or as a group P&A, we can define drivers which will be used by the planners for doing planning process. Here, for revenue planning, we are trying to set up the average selling price as well as the cost by each of the product, and so this is by each product and by each of the entities that we have defined. And typically a form that we have created. Data is actually input, and this form can also be taken to Excel, which we'll see in a while. There are activities like and exchange rates. So that is used to calculate the tax and exchange rates for doing a currency conversion. And we can also define different types of rates. For example, we can use average rate, month-end rates for different purposes. For example, if you want to calculate income statement based on average rate, so we can use that, and balance items using month rates. That can also be achieved using these tables. And to set up this particular process, users can planning activities. We can have classification of those cards. So here, when we go to this form, so wherein we plan for our revenue by each product. Now you see that the top is your, so that's what we input, and then based on the average selling price that we saw, we calculate the sales as the cost of sales, give us a gross margin. This is a very simplistic model that we have created, and based on the requirement, we can write specific rules and create forms which cater to the specific requirements that we may have. See, like sections 1, if you look at 1, so here you would see that the cells are white, and below these cells are gray out, wherein we cannot input any data here. So it doesn't me to input any data, whereas I can only input users are allowed to be input. If I change some numbers here, so in the back end we have business rules defined and attached to this form. So when I change the numbers, it can actually go and change the numbers and actually change my entire planned. So calculate my sales. The cost of sales is calculated based on the calculations that we defined, and then that also triggers kind of calculation of the tax and does a currency conversion in the back end. Number here, the numbers would change. Yeah, so when I change this, so the sale and the cost of sales both changed. So if you look at form, actually single form, but can be used by multiple entities because I have access to all the entities. I can see all the entity in the drop down. But when we security defined, you can actually control what security needs to be applied for each of the entity. And select that entity, I can see the data for that entity. So we don't need to define different forms for different entities, or for that matter for different departments. We can have the same forms used, and the data changes based on the selections that we have done. We have a form for calculating our expenses. So under expenses, the expenses would be by department, and so these are the departments, and these are the operating expense accounts, the GR accounts that we use to calculate. And so here, this is the entity drop down that we get. So again, we can use a single form to inputs at various levels at the departments or different users. Here, this form can be used by administrators so that we have all the departments in the rows. But then there would also be a form can be created. We have the departments drop down or account in the drop down. So based on the requirement, we can kind of format of the form so that it can be used by specific departments or specific category of users. And then once we have the security covered, you not see the data that they don't have access to. Then this whatever we saw earlier is summarized into a income statement or a P&L that we call, and this is a simple form which shows a view of the budgeted P&L that we created. As different entities here. Different view of the data. Also different combination, like for example, if I want to see the forecast for FY18, so it would show me the forecast for 18 as well. I have to the form. Now, the forecast for FY18, we have a scenario where we have Jan to September as actuals, and then from October to December we are doing our Q for do that. The actual period actually is locked, so that nobody actually change the values for that period, whereas the forecast period is open. Values for that particular period can be changed. And the other thing, it doesn't allow me to change the values that are there in the actual period. Now, typically, what happens is once you have a plan, it can be revised each month or each quarter, and it has a combination of the actual as well as the forecasted values. So normally we call it as 9+3 or 6 plan or forecast. So the actual data that we get from ERP systems can be continuously uploaded into a forecast scenario, and then the budgeted value can be copied into the forecast scenario, so that it gives a complete 12-month view, combination of actual and the forecasted values. Now, we can graph dashboards. The function provides for dashboards in a format, and I can actually change the type of graphs that I want. Fly, for example, if a bar graph. The data is there behind the scenes, so these dashboards can be dynamically created. Again, as we see, it is dependent on the entity that we are selecting. Yeah. In local currency, or we want to see it in the reporting currency. So just the drop that are available in the forms or reports actually gives us a view of the relevant data. Thing with like how system gets set up. So we don't need to hard code the pure in the forms or in the rules. We have something known as substitution variables. So variables kind of drive what members to be shown in the forms. So what is the forecast year? what is an year, and on this, all the forms and rules get updated automatically. So we don't changing a financial year. We don't need to go into in each of the form or the business rules to change them. What we get is everything gets replaced based on the single selection that we do here. What's the dimensions and forms, but what runs behind the scenes are the business rules, and these business rules can be written in a flexible way. Is the logic that we have used here. So if you look here, we are using the year dynamically based on the variables that we saw, and we find the logic within this within the business rules. And based on these business rules, the character that are required. For example, if you want to do driver-based plan, currency conversion, the aggregations, everything happen based on these rules. Now, once this we will see is in the reports how the data gets consolidated as well. So, doing plans by each entity, once we run the business rules or they're executed as a part of the batch process or as a part of the form save, the data gets consolidated. Consolidated view reports can be seen. Here is the source. Questions? Any clarification that?
Question that I received is data be leveraged within Excel, and you can we Excel to interact
Yes.
with PBCS?
Yes, do that. So I'll be showing it in a while.
Okay.
To reports. So these are the reports. I mean, we can have structured reports which can be used. Reports. We saw that similar data in the forms that is used for inputs and then viewing the data on a basis. But it can be used more from for structured or propagated reports. We have modes of opening the report we have in HTML or in PDF on Excel. Open report in Excel. So that is created as a part of the reporting studio, can be opened in Excel and can be changed, or directly be open in PDF or email. of the reports we can create. So this is an ad hoc report. Then more structured report wherein we have different
The reporting tool is really flexible and really business friendly for either create ad hoc report or even boardroom quality reports.
Yeah, we can create boardroom quality reports as well using financial reports. These are structured reports, and these can be very. I mean, we don't need to create a report for each of the requirements. So once we define the reports, that can be used all the time. In this case, we have consolidated report with entities, and then the last column is a consolidated for all the entities added together, and also has local and in local currency and in US dollars. So have a flexibility of kind of drilling down next levels. For example, we have included the year total, but in case we want to drill and get the base length for period, or we can see numbers here. So the report starts with at the top level, and then we can drill further down.
Open up the lines for Q&A in another 5 minutes. So,
okay.
Time check.
Okay. So these are the reports which can enable drill. If you want to go into a little more details as to because sales is by product, so we can go into by each product. For expenses, it can go by each department, so that option is available. Now to access reports or ad hoc analysis that we call. We have the Excel add-in or the Smart View is used for loading data into the system or doing an ad hoc analysis. Kind of if the typical P&L that we have, I want to drill by each department. I'll be able to drill by each department. Yeah. And then typically this is used by finance people either to create report or do analysis based on criteria, or has different options available in case I want to have my where the, not to see rows where we don't have any data. So it press.
Since users love the Smart View plugin into Excel, really easy to create reports. You can drag and drop the different attributes and render a report, and then ultimately, share it with your peers within all the confines of Excel.
And it taken rows to columns and columns to rows. We can drill down to different levels. So if I want to specific entry and then drill down by each level. You can just pivot it department. Just missing. So it will only the rows we have data. Pivot. The base layer we have data. This provides us a flexibility to kind of go to the base level where we have the data. Then I want to select on sales by product. This is what we want to see. What it is. And then next right click, double right click to get the total entity, and then so provide flexibility in terms of data analysis. Question we have?
Not Prashant. Keep going.
Okay. So it's not only for reporting, even we can use Smart for loading of data. So I can in case of do a bulk load, instead of using the forms, I can change data here. And it stored in the system. Now the system provides a functionality. The moment I change the value here, its color, and then once if that the data is still not there in the system, it's in Excel. So once I submit it, it goes database, and then that I can see in the form or in the report as well. Come the application.
So any other highlights you want to touch before we open up lines?
I think unless you have some specific questions.
At this point, we'll open up the lines and unmute for folks to ask questions. That I just received via chat, Prashant, you can help answer. For force, can we plan at employee level, or is it limited to planning based on global drivers?
Yeah, so we define drivers in planning. The workforce can be by each individual employees. So we can build modules for workforce, for capex, or cash flows if you want to. For example, what we are seeing here is we can have for building the plan by each employee. And typically, if you want to plan by each employee, for example, you can see here built-in models wherein you can select each employee and say we get a new hire, we want to add and the drivers that we have defined, and based on the parameters that have been defined, you can actually set up this so we have defined midpoint salaries by each the jobs. Based on that, we are getting salary for each employee.
Okay, Prashant, one last question. What is the scenario or what if modeling that's available in PCS?
Have a scenario dimension in the application. Scenario dimension enables you to have multiple versions of plan. Typically, what we can configure is different scenarios. For example, if you want to do a what-if analysis, a different scenario, or we can have a different version of the plan. So using a combination of version and scenario, we can define different rules and we copy from one version to other version and change parameters to what numbers we are getting based on a certain scenario settings that we want to. And once we are satisfied with the numbers that we are looking for, we can put into the main plan or keep backup versions with different scenarios.
Perfect. At this point, I'm not seeing any more questions. So we go ahead and close our webinar. Before we do that, a big thank you to all the folks who attended the webinar. It's always difficult to take some time off from a busy schedule, but hopefully found this informative. Thanks again.